Hey, Zach, thanks for joining us today. As way getting started, give us a little background on yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Zach Gillen. I'm based out of Boston, Massachusetts. I am a little bit of a unique background in terms of where I'm from. I grew up in the South in Birmingham, Alabama. Found my way up here to New England via college, and haven't left since then. So uh, I work for a company called Torque. I'm in enterprise sales, and we do um, we find software development jobs for folks around the world. So we've got a community of about 10,000 software developers that are based in various locations around the world.
But you do have an unusual background. How does a guy go from Brown into sales?
It's funny. My dad is a pharmaceutical sales rep and has been his whole life. And sent me to Brown, said, Zach, go study finance, go into banking, go do something else. And I did a finance internship. I thought it was okay. I liked it. It was fun, but I started interviewing with some startups right out of college and just fell in love with the atmosphere of the sales floor and an early stage company where everyone's trying to figure it out, and the phones are bumping and it's loud. And my dad I said, Dad, I know you want me to do something else, but I got the sales bug. Something about it drove me to it. So I'd say it's been a good decision so far.
Cool. What do you like about it?
I think my favorite part of sales is relationship building. It's, to me, arguably like one of the more important aspects of the job. I think I've heard people say it on your show, like people buy from people. They don't buy products. So I think getting to know people and fostering those relationships and keeping them going year after year. I mean, there are people that in my role now, I still call on that I called on when I was a BDR, my first job out of school, but I just keep the connections going on LinkedIn, talk to people when you're in town, whatever that may be. Just keep those when you keep those relationships strong, the people know you're genuine and you care about their success, and that's the most important part of the relationship, I'd say.
And what do you see most people doing wrong with that?
I think going pushing people on their timeline and just not trying to take the time to fully understand what the pain or problem is you're trying to solve. I think it becomes like a feature functionality, like, oh, they told me that I used to work at Salesforce. It's like, oh, they told me that they are using Excel for their CRM, right? And like, oh, well, we have a great CRM. Why don't I show it to you? I don't think you really take the time to get to know that person, understand what they're metriced on, what they're driven by, like getting to know those folks. So I think maybe going too fast and trying to just jump right into like feature. This is how we're different, selling essentially as opposed to listening. So I think
Yeah.
that
And you worked at a couple of companies. What type of market or persona that you're selling to fit your personality or your style the best?
it's a good question. I think so. My first job was at a company called Catalent Technologies, pretty similar to what I'm doing now in terms of mechanics of the market. But it was focused on management consulting. So we were kind of thinking like, hey, let's disrupt the management consulting space, provide this talent marketplace for independent consultants. And I think what was cool about that was it was, business level, like business focused executives that have big initiatives going on that I think lend itself well to my personality, which is I'm not a big I don't like to hear myself talk. So I think maybe sometimes the bigger wig executives want to drive more of the conversation and uh and being a good listener and active listening, then asking good questions, let them talk. Those guys like to talk more. Whereas maybe in my current role now, I love it, but I'm dealing with more like engineering type personas, which they're a little more quiet. They want to ask questions and hear from you more than you talk. So I think that fit my personality better. But it's been a good challenge to change it up.
Yeah. Has it been hard? Because I noticed that too. I'd go in because 9 out of 10 people like to talk. But you
Yeah.
get that one person who wants to listen and sit back and be presented to. It's a whole different call.
It it is. It's funny that you mentioned you hear the same thing. I just had, we use Gong. It records our sales calls, and I'm sure most folks will be familiar with it. And um, my CRO shared a clip from one of these calls where you look at the talk time, and like ideally, like I think, I don't know what the exact golden ratio is, but you want to be listening more than you're talking. And he was sharing something from that call, and he was complimenting me, and I commented in Slack, and don't look at the talk time on this one. This is not one of my better calls. But I think, to your point, like that persona, that person wanted to be spoken to. So try to be as precise as you can while giving them what they want, and following up your statements with questions that are open-ended, like might be able to get them to talk, or they're just going to keep peppering you one after the other. So it's a mixed bag.
Well, that's it. Because there was a lot of, talk to listen ratios, a couple years ago. And it's like, well, it depends on both people.
Yeah,
Because if you sell in Manhattan, it's very different than selling in Arkansas. Is that where you grew up?
exactly. I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama. So
Alabama. Yeah,
exactly. And maybe even further, the time you spend talking about business might be even less
a
than
lot. Yeah.
in Manhattan. They're like, all right, why do you hear? What do you want? What do you want?
Yeah.
In Birmingham,
Yeah,
in
yeah,
Birmingham, you spend 20 minutes of an hour meeting talking about the wife, the kids, the family, the dog, whatever it may be, and building that relationship. So it's been, yeah, I hear you.
yeah. And do you think that's your personality, your upbringing, or your style, or?
I think it's personality more so, because I would think I am a pretty introverted person. And if there's one thing I've learned about sales that I think is super interesting, I had a boss one time say, like, the best salesperson is not the one who's can make the prettiest words and spin the best tale and talk the most. Like, the salesperson you want to watch out for is the one who doesn't talk and is listening and listening and listening, and taking the information you're giving and then formulating that into like a very succinct, good story that can be told quickly and with a question behind it that has a purpose. So I think I've always tried to emulate that style. So it fits my personality well, I guess.
Uh, and that's it. And I think too many people think that sales is one way,
Yeah,
as opposed to like anything else. You just adapt it to your personality and the client's personality.
exactly.
Because if you get into the situation where the sales rep wants to talk and the client wants to talk, nothing.
Yeah.
And what was it like getting into sales as an introvert for you? Because you come with economic background
Yeah.
from school.
Yeah. Did so it's business econ. So it was the track at Brown that I make the joke all the time, like I wasn't good enough at math to do the real economics track, because at some point economics just turns into calculus. And I was like, I'm more interested on the business side and
Yeah.
getting to know some entrepreneurship stuff. So fortunately, Brown had an awesome program that combined the two, more some organizational theories combined with economics and entrepreneurship classes, which is kind of what led me to where I am now. But to answer your question about how was it at first, the word I would choose is uncomfortable. And I think anybody who's been in an entry level sales role knows exactly what that game is about. And it's about volume and numbers and repetition and being comfortable hearing the word no said to you
Yeah.
more often than you're going to hear the word yes. So I was fortunate to have some good mentors to get me through it, but it was very uncomfortable.
And how did you get through it from a mindset standpoint? Because you didn't have to do that. You could have taken the other route, the easy route.
I from a mindset standpoint, I am super competitive, and I was put into an environment with a lot of other very competitive, smart, driven people that had been in the role for averaging 6 months to a year before me. And it was a really tight knit company, and like we were really tight knit as a group. So the idea of letting someone be better than me at something was just not going to happen. So I was less driven. I think I have like I think a mentor once told me, like, if you're going to be good at sales, you either be driven by money or you better be competitive. And if you're both, then hey, this is definitely the profession for you. So I tend to lean myself towards the competitive side, and nobody's going to complain about money when it comes to you. But I think the competitive nature and just like not letting that person next to you be better than you has been good to me for
Well,
my mindset.
I had someone tell me something similar because he always had the competitiveness, and he always felt that if he beat his competitor, the money was there.
Yeah.
So you didn't have to focus on the money. It was just a byproduct of beating the competition.
Mm-hmm.
And what does that look like in your mind, the competitiveness?
In
You know,
a Yeah, in like in a business development role, it's actually funny. I've been challenged to maybe scale that back a little bit in my current role, especially.
it might be a little overboard, or
Yeah, I think it served me well in a business development role
yeah.
where, look, we're metrics driven. You need to make your calls, you need to send your emails, you need to follow up, and you can book meetings based off that. Deals don't close based off activity. and,
Oh, yeah,
and
wait a
look,
second. Let me get the recorder. There's a lot of managers who don't believe that, but maybe they're selling alarm systems or something. But
yeah, so I've been challenged to maybe take a step back and be competitive, not against other people, but against
your
myself.
competition.
Yeah, and yeah, I think yes. So that's that's kind of, it's been funny to see that transition as you get older in in your career. Like things tend to change like that. So
Well, that's it. You go on to the account exec side,
mhm,
and activity without accomplishment is just busyness.
precisely.
Yeah. And did someone have to tell you that, or did it take a quarter or two to figure out that you worked your butt off and things weren't coming through the way you thought?
It's funny that I remember the first sales, like, so I was promoted at my first company into an account executive role, and you're given just a fresh patch with no
No
business
house
done,
accounts.
no, nothing to grow, just hunting. And so it was a nice, I hated it at the time because I was pissed other people were beating me. But in hindsight, it was a very good experience because I got to take, all right, hey, you don't have anybody supporting you. You got to take all the same skill sets that you just proved to us that you mastered in the business development role, move those over to build your own book of business. And then after a quarter or two, you start to realize, oh, I need to be smarter with my time. I can't just book the meetings for the sake of
It's
booking
not
the
counting
meetings.
calls anymore.
Yeah, qualifying out is just as important as qualifying in. So it it takes a quarter. It probably took me 2 quarters, I'd say, to get that mindset of like, hey, I shouldn't just be, oh, this person took a meeting with me. Great. I'm so excited. I can't wait to sell them something. No, you should almost be a little skeptical. Be like, all right, what are the red flags here? Why would this person not be able to buy from me? That's almost as important as why they would. So
And then it went from an activity game to a thinking game.
exactly.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, to me, that's what makes sales a sustaining career. For me, from a development standpoint, a learning standpoint, you just very rarely see the same situation twice exactly the way it is. You can create some kind of process and repetition. You start to get the same objections over and over, but when those deals are on the finish line, there will always be some new thing you've never seen that comes up that gets in the way, and you have to think critically, and you lean on your past experience to draw parallels. But I like the challenge of never seeing the same thing twice, and always kind of being on my toes.
So you had the energy from the competitiveness. How did you get the knowledge of how these companies buy, how to control that and guide that process?
It's super good question. I think I was fortunate to have grown up in that first sales, business development sales career, excuse me, where the end market was people that buy consulting. And so what that tends to mean is that it's, executive level with a wide purview across an entire big enterprise. So by the time I was, 25, 26, I was working with another account executive on, $20 billion companies in revenue, which was super fun. But at the same time, I got to see like, oh, wow, just because Joe in strategy wants to buy this project, Steve or Lisa in finance has to approve it. And so and then to get set up as a vendor, procurement needs to come in. So I saw at like this massive scale how much like bureaucracy and different moving parts there can be in any particular given deal. Getting master services agreement in place, invoicing, paperwork, stuff like that. So I got to see kind of firsthand at the large, very big scale how those companies work. And I think that seeing it, it's almost like once you see it once, you're like, oh, every deal could potentially have this many stakeholders that have a say in what goes on. And you stop thinking, all right, if you're at the finish line praying for one person to sign something, you're toast. You might as well just go home at that point.
Yet a lot of reps do that.
Well, it's like a comfortable thing.
Right.
It puts you in a comfortable. You're uncomfortable because you trust them, but you don't have to put yourself out there to hear no again, because you can just say, oh, well, Steve said he's going to sign this, so I'm going to trust that he can get it all done. And it doesn't really work out like that. Another good mentor once told me, never put your paycheck in someone else's mouth, which I really liked. So don't let somebody else do the selling for you to their counterparts. You should always be part of those conversations. So that just speaks to that multi-threaded aspect.
And I got to imagine you also found it that they didn't really want you rooting around in the company without their assistance and permission and guidance.
It's definitely, you have to walk a fine rope of being professional. Like, hey, I got to do my job, man. I got to talk to more people than just you. But it's awkward. It can be awkward
It's
at
very
first.
awkward. Yeah.
When, oh, well, you don't trust me. You don't think I can get this done for you? I was like, no, well, it depends. It kind of goes back to that. If you have the right relationship with the right people, they should be introducing you to other people around to make sure that things don't fall on them if it doesn't go wrong. So,
yeah, because usually if they don't do that, they don't really have permission to be doing. They're kind of they're also hoping it's going to go through.
Exactly.
Or they don't know and don't want you to know they don't know. And then it just turns into a nice, academic exercise.
Expensive academic exercise in terms of your time.
So what drives you now that you don't have like the other people right around you where you can see the leaderboard and it's not a day-to-day competition?
I'm definitely still hyper competitive. How Michael Jordan would just like make stuff up in his head. Like, I'm just that bothers me. Like, I'm gonna work hard and go do that. I think I have a little, maybe not to Michael Jordan's standards of that, but I do still have the competitiveness. But I think you mentioned it earlier, kind of turning it outward to competition, especially when you're in a small stage startup, kind of in like a fairly crowded space. And we were founded for a specific reason to make a process better. Like, what are the companies that don't do it well? Like, let's go get them. Like what are we doing here if we're not doing that? So definitely that. And then one thing I'm trying to take on more, I think I'm driven by, like, I don't know if career progression is the right word, but kind of moving up. I think long term, I would like to see myself move into a management role. So I'm working with people around the company to take on more responsibility outside of just, your day-to-day sales activities, and try to get that bird's eye view, if you will, of a company and how it operates and what you need to take on to mentor people and build processes and scale. So I think a little bit of, so I guess a long-winded way of saying I still have my competitiveness that I like, but there are new things that I've learned to channel it into that I can learn to make myself better and keep things moving.
So you view it now more as the challenge of convincing them that there's a smarter way of doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, you could say that.
Yeah, well, which is good, especially in your current role, because
Yeah.
that's really what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because some
Exactly.
people like, a head-to-head competitor,
Mhm.
maybe like at Salesforce, where you're competing against, Microsoft, Oracle, whoever,
Yeah.
and you get the beauty contest and you got to outmaneuver the other people.
Yes.
Replacing some older process is a different type of sell.
Yes.
Yeah. And what do you believe about sales that most people don't believe is true? What's your perspective?
I think I think I would probably lean towards the thing we talked about earlier, which is the person who talks the best doesn't always perform the best,
Yeah, it's
and
not about talking.
it's more of a listening activity. So I think an outsider perspective of, when you think of the classic don't be a salesperson example, is like don't be the used car salesman. So I think there's a perception out there that that's what sales is, but the people that I've come across in my career and have worked with, I would say they are like some of the most intelligent, like quietly confident people that I've ever seen in a professional setting. And I guess there probably are still the snake oil salesmen out there somewhere, but I don't think that um, they do as well as they'd like you to believe.
Well, I think, we've from the media and sometimes early roles, we're taught that it is about talking
Mm.
and fast and getting asking for something and then handling an objection and then closing for the next step. And it's like, I'm not sure anyone wants that on the other end.
Yeah.
And what type of questions do you have to go to when you're trying to get the other person to talk?
I think I go to, you never want to, I try to stay away from the what keeps you up at night question.
Yeah.
But you can ask that question
1,000 different ways.
without saying what keeps you up at night. And
Yeah.
I think part of that comes from doing research on who you're talking to and asking them questions about, you should know your research, like what are the four main things that a head of engineering cares about on any given day. And you can ask targeted to that point, like, how are you doing hiring engineers right now? Are you on track, or do you think there's a lot of people out there that need jobs right now? It's like kind of, so things that are targeted towards specific pain points that you research ahead of time are things that I tend to go to.
Because that's the persona I sold to most of my career, and they're not easy,
No.
right? Because they're kind of like in Manhattan with the bankers. They're very pointed,
Mm-hmm.
transactional, and it takes a while for them to open up. But of all the engineers, they're the ones with the most personality, which isn't saying much, I guess.
And when you earn their trust, I think you keep it.
Yeah.
I don't think there's maybe like the idea of switching costs doesn't really apply here, but in terms of like switching from services provider to services provider. But if you do a good job and people trust you to do well, chances are they're going to come back to you and they're going to tell your friends about you. In this, I'm speaking specifically to this segment. So it's new to me. I'm about 7 months in and still learning. So if anybody out there listening to this wants to brainstorm with me, I'm all ears.
And what do you think was the best lesson you learned coming up that would have, if you learned it a few years earlier, the first year would have saved you a lot of heartache?
That's a good one. I think the best lesson, I got one. So the best rep that I've ever worked with, she told me about a year and a half into my career. I wish I had heard this a lot earlier. The best reps maintain a constant state of activity and don't let the ups and downs of things we can't control affect how they do their day to day. And that is so hard to do, because it is so easy if you get bad news on something to just close your laptop and take the dog for a walk and just forget about it. But if you even, and then the exact opposite, if you just close a big deal, it's so easy to walk away and be like, oh man, I'm great. I'm sitting pretty. Like I got my done numbers looking good. So no matter what, if you're having a good quarter, you're having a bad quarter, the activity level should be the same. And I know we talked about how activity doesn't always equal results, but it is important from all points of the deal aspect to maintain that same consistency in everything you do.
Well, that's it, because it's not just us. The company kind of rides a quarterly roller coaster.
Yes.
I don't know if you've noticed that or not.
It does.
You get the first month with QBRs and bunch of crap, no comp plan, no quotas, no territories. You don't have anything.
Yeah.
In the middle, oh, hey, we got to sell something. End of the quarter, we got to sell something now.
Yes. Yes.
And it's really hard for reps to kind of keep that equilibrium throughout the quarter.
Yes.
Cool. Hey, I really appreciate your time today. Where can people go to connect and follow you?
So I'm on LinkedIn, just Zach Gillen, and that's I don't have any other media outlets going on, but happy to connect on LinkedIn.